world is upon us. The time of the ancients has passed into legend. The races that survive must find a way to live in this new reality. But can they remember and hold true to the lessons of the past? Or is history doomed to repeat itself? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and come, take a seat by the fire as a new moon rises. The Quel'thalas are not what they once were, no longer as carefree. While many of their people turn towards the natural world or the light of a loon for succor, for most it was too hard to let go. The magic they wielded and the power of the well was not so easily forgotten. Despite this, the Night Elves were nothing if not resilient. The male druids would hibernate under the tutelage of Malfurion. Tyrande herself would be appointed the High Priestess of Elune. She had always been marked by the goddess. After what she did for her people, her words would always be held in high regard. She was left to protect what remained of Kalimdor, but no matter how hard Tyrande tried, she could not shake the thought that the Legion would one day return. To this end, she established the Sentinels, a highly trained and ferocious order of female warrior rangers. They would roam and police the shaded boughs of the forests as the Night Elves began to spread out once more into Ashenvale and the Darkshore. Despite all they had been through, the Druids led by Malfurion would deepen their connection with nature, so much so that they learned to take on the lesser forms of the wild gods. These shapeshifted forms allowed them to take on the power and aspects of their patron god. From the stalwart bears to the ferocious sabers, the experimentation would go on and on, testing their very limits. One of the wild gods was a large, imposing wolf named Galdrin. He was one of the greatest and most dangerous of his kind. Known throughout many cultures and many worlds, the white wolf embodied ferocity, savagery, and the hunt. Malfurion was the first to take on his power. He shapeshifted then into the pack form. It was within the ecstasy of this rage he lost himself. There is no distinction between friend or foe, even going so far as attacking Cenarius. Cenarius did use his magic to force Malfurion to sleep beneath a tree within the Emerald Dream, where his rage would be soothed. Once he awoke from the slumber, he realized the danger and banned all other druids from assuming this form. A young and rather talented druid named R'hllor did not agree with this ban. In secret, he would attempt to master the impressive power of the pack form. Other novice druids would feel the same and follow him. They retrieved a fang from Galdrin himself and a staff and combined them to create the legendary Scythe of Elune. This powerful weapon would allow them to deepen their connection to the pack. The years passed without much note. Tensions rose up on occasion, often between the highborn and the lowborn. Many were lost to the Great War, and it seemed like the timeless elves were not so quick to forgive. The Sentinels were swift in reaction, however, making sure that peace was kept at all cost. If only peace could last. However, just beyond their lands, eyes looked on at the elves with jealousy and hatred. Not just mortals survived the sundering. Many demons had too. Among them were the Satyr, the twisted, cursed highborn infected by Xavius. They began to gather what demons remained on the world and planned to root the elves once more. Once the demons tread the first ground in the Night Elven lands, their people sprang into action. The druids were awoken from their slumber in the barrow dens, and Malfurion, Tyrande, and Chandris led their people into battle once more. Once the fighting broke out, R'hllor pleaded with Malfurion to allow the druids to assume the pack form to combat this new threat. but he was repeatedly refused. Now prone to rage, the constant refusal drove him to madness. They would no longer use the sight of a loon to empower themselves. They would submit to its energies totally. Only after their absolute victory against the Satyr would the other druids see their worth. This time, when they shifted, they were not what they once were. They were not a wolf pack, but half-wolf, half-mortal abominations, driven to frenzy with bloodlust. They entered the battle with teeth and claws, ripping any demons that opposed them to shreds. But they had no control, and they attacked any night elves that got caught too close. However, this was only the beginning. Any elf that was bitten would contract a virulent curse. They themselves would transform into these half-beasts. No longer would they go under the name of the pack. They were something new, and were thus named the Worgen. While the war itself was short-lived, and the Satyr beaten into submission, the new Worgen threat loomed. Malfurion then gathered the most wise and ancient of the Druids to a sacred land north of Mount Hyal named the Moonglade. Here he laid out rules and guidelines in Druidic practice. With the blessing of the great Cenarius, they founded the Cenarian Circle, a Druidic order focused on maintaining the balance of nature. Their first act would have to be dealing with this Worgen problem. He retrieved the sight of a loon and met with R'hllor and his Worgen pack, although he would now go under the name of the Alpha Prime. With a heavy heart, Malfurion used the sight to force the Worgen beyond the veil, to the Emerald Dream. He would seal them there, beneath the great tree where he once slumbered to abate his own rage. It was his hope that this would have the same effect, that perhaps one day the curse may be broken and they could return. Knowledge of them, however, eventually passed into myth and legend. In secret, Malfurion bequeathed the sight to a priestess, where it would remain hidden until her death. It would be all but forgotten from the world. The time after was a time of unprecedented peace and tranquility. Many of the other races in Kalimdor began to flourish once more, the Firbolg and Quilboar being notably among them. But the ever-present tension between the Highborn and those that followed the Druidic path was ever-present, and would eventually reach a boiling point. One particularly brash former Highborn had become de facto leader of the mages, and could not live without the arcane energies. They wished nothing more than to give in to their addiction and tap the energies of the new well. He would outcry in public and taunt the Druids. He called them weak for not embracing their magical gift, but his insults were in vain. The penalty for using arcane magic was death. In a moment of madness, the Highborn gathered and attempted to force the Druid's hand, a vain attempt to get their own way. They tapped into the arcane magics and summoned a terrible storm upon the tranquil Ashenvale. This did force the hand, but not in the way the Highborn had hoped. They could not put to death so many of their kin, but they had left them little choice. Instead, they were all gathered and brought to the eastern coast. A foolish overreaction, exclaimed Dathramar, as they were placed in boats. Their punishment would be exile forevermore. They were to leave the lands of Kalimdor and never return. None knew what lay beyond the maelstrom, perhaps nothing at all, but it was their fate to pursue now. The Kaldorei withdrew. Calling to the ancient spirits, they raised a barrier of mist around Kalimdor. Their kin could never find their way home, even should they wish to, and their connection to the well would be severed with it. Although Dathramar did not seem as concerned as his fellow Highborn, should the effects of magical addiction take hold. Eventually, many of their ships did land in the Tirisfal Glades of the now named continent of Azeroth. which would today be named the Eastern Kingdoms. Dathomir had planned for this eventuality. He would start a kingdom of his own. To this end, before his departure, he had stolen one of the vials of eternity from Illidan. After finding a suitable location, he poured the vial and ignited a great magical fire that he named the Sunwell. Wishing to distance himself from his moon-worshipping Kaldorei cousins. From this source his people could draw upon its power. While much weaker than its predecessors, he promised the well would be more powerful than any other, given time. From here the Highborn founded the first kingdom of the now High Elves, Quel'thalas. The energies of this new fiery well once again altered the form of the elves. Their skin grew paler and more pink, their hair more fair, and their eyes would glow a brighter shade of blue, like the morning sky. This was a kingdom of the arcane. Magical practice would be encouraged, but monitored, as to not bring about another calamity. It would take these high elves more than 1,000 years to expand their kingdom, but they built beautiful, intricate cities and holdings of their own, and would practice the arcane arts ceaselessly. Elves are a long-lived race, even without the immortality that the Great Tree provided. Although Dathomir would pass away, he would always be remembered, especially through his successors. Beautiful trees with golden and red would scour the landscape, but the mark these high elves would leave is only just beginning. We will have to find out the rest in a future episode. For now, really thank you so much to everyone for every bit of support. Every like or comment, it helps more than you know. And don't forget to come back anytime.